For 35 years, I devoted my life to my son Michael, working double shifts as a nurse to put him through college, sacrificing my own dreams and retirement to give him every opportunity. Then one night, after moving in with him and his wife Amanda when my rental was sold, I overheard her call me dead weight and a financial burden will never shake. What they didn't know was that my late sister had left me her entire estate worth nearly $2.7 million, and I was about to use it to teach them the true cost of ingratitude in a way they'd never forget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember the day Michael was born, October 17th, 1987. A rainy Friday afternoon, the hospital bustling with weekend admissions. I was just 32, working as a nurse in the cardiology department, married to David, who taught history at the local high school. We lived in a modest two-bedroom house in Oakridge, a quiet suburb of Portland, where the streets were lined with oak, trees that turned brilliant gold every autumn. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and I had visions of filling it with children, laughter, and the kind of warm, chaotic happiness I'd grown up with in my own family. But sometimes, life has other plans. David was diagnosed with a congenital heart condition 6 months after Michael was born. The doctors gave him 5 years, maybe 10 with the right treatments. I remember sitting in Dr. Harmon's office, clutching Michael to my chest, while the cardiologist explained in gentle, measured tones that my husband's heart was failing. My own heart seemed to stop as I tried to process what this meant. Michael might grow up without his father. I might lose my husband. Our little family, just beginning to bloom, had an expiration date. "We'll fight this," David had said on the drive home, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "I'm going to see this little guy graduate high school. That's my goal." For the next 7 years, that's exactly what we did. We fought. David took experimental medications, underwent 3 surgeries, and stuck to a strict regimen of diet and limited exercise. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital to cover the mounting medical bills. My sister Julia, 5 years older and unmarried, moved into our spare room to help with Michael when I was working. We existed in a state of constant vigilance, counting medications, monitoring symptoms, living between checkups and emergency room visits. Despite it all, there were moments of joy. David coaching Michael's t-ball team from the sidelines. Weekend. Picnics in the park where we'd spread a blanket under the oak trees and pretend we were just like any other family. David teaching Michael to read. The two of them huddled on our worn plaid couch, sounding out words from Where the Wild Things Are and The Giving Tree. Then came the morning when I couldn't wake David up. Michael was 7 years old. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and casseroles, of people telling me how sorry they were, how brave I was being. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out everything inside me except for one fierce, burning determination. Michael would have the life his father had wanted for him. He would have opportunities. He would be happy. Julia stayed with us, turning down a promotion that would have required her to move to Seattle. "You two need me," she said simply. "The corporate ladder will still be there when Michael's older." She became more than an aunt to Michael. She was a second mother, the person who attended school events when I was working night shifts, who made his favorite chicken noodle soup when he was sick, who helped him with science projects and listened to his dreams. To make ends meet, I transferred to the emergency department where the shift differentials were higher. I worked nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took to keep our little house, to build a college fund for Michael, to create some semblance of the life David and I had planned. Some nights, after a 12-hour shift dealing with traumas and heartbreak, I'd come home at dawn, kiss Michael's forehead as he slept, and collapse into bed for a few hours before getting up to make his breakfast and send him off to school. Through it all, I kept one of David's sweaters, a soft blue cardigan that still somehow held the faint scent of his cologne. On the hardest nights, I'd wrap myself in it and allow myself 10 minutes of tears before pulling myself together. Just 10 minutes. That was all the time I could spare for grief with a young son depending on me. Michael was a bright, thoughtful boy who grew into a determined teenager. He had David's warm brown eyes and dimpled smile, but my stubborn streak. When he was 14, he announced he wanted to become a lawyer. "I want to help people who can't help themselves," he told me, his eyes shining with purpose. My chest swelled with pride. This was what all the sacrifice was for. This passionate, idealistic young man who wanted to make a difference. I started putting away even more for his college fund, picking up extra shifts around Christmas and summer breaks. Julia contributed too, setting aside a portion of her marketing director's salary for her nephew's education. "He's my only nephew," she'd say with a wink when I protested. "Where else am I going to spend my money? On cats?" High school graduation came, and I sat in the audience with Julia, both of us crying as Michael walked across the stage. I fingered the worn blue cardigan I'd brought in my purse, a piece of David to witness this milestone. "He made it," I whispered to the empty space beside me where David should have been. "He made it, and he's going to do great things." Michael was accepted to Georgetown University with a partial scholarship. It wasn't enough to cover the full cost, but I was determined to make it work. "We'll figure it out," I told him when he expressed concern about the expense. "This is your dream. We don't compromise on dreams in this family." That summer before he left for college, Michael worked at a local law firm, filing paperwork and answering phones. I picked up a second part-time job at an urgent care clinic. Julia surprised us with a check that covered his first year's housing. "An investment in our future attorney," she called it. The day we drove him to campus was one of the hardest of my life. Not because I wasn't proud, I was bursting with pride, but because for the first time in 18 years my purpose had changed. I wasn't just Michael's mom anymore. I needed to figure out who Elaine Patterson was beyond that identity. Julia, always perceptive, noticed my struggle. "You know," she said as we drove back to Portland, the car eerily quiet without Michael's presence. "You've spent almost 2 decades putting that boy first. Maybe it's time to think about what you want for a change." What did I want? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on Michael's needs, on survival, on making it through each day, that I'd forgotten how to want things for myself. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe travel? I've always wanted to see Europe. David and I talked about going to Italy someday." Julia nodded. "Italy sounds perfect. Let's start saving." But Italy would have to wait. Georgetown was expensive, even with Michael's scholarship and part-time job on campus. I continued working both jobs, sending money for books, for meal plans, for winter clothes suitable for East Coast weather. During his second year, when he needed a laptop for his classes, I dipped into my small retirement fund to buy it. "Just this once," I told myself. "It's an investment in his future." Julia scolded me for that. "You can't keep setting yourself on fire to keep him warm, Elaine," she warned. "You're 50 now. You need to think about your own future, too." But it was hard to focus on my future when Michael's seemed so bright. He thrived at Georgetown, joining the debate team, interning at a nonprofit legal center, making connections that would serve him well in his career. Each time we talked on the phone, I could hear the growing confidence in his voice, the excitement as he described his classes, his friends, his dreams for the future. During his junior year, Michael met Amanda Kim, a brilliant economics major, from San Francisco. The first time he mentioned her name, his voice changed, softer, with a hint of awe. "She's amazing, Mom," he told me. "She's going to change the world someday." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When they started dating seriously, Michael brought her home for Thanksgiving. Amanda was indeed impressive, tall and poised, with glossy black hair and an incisive intelligence that showed in her quick, articulate speech. She had plans to pursue a master's in international development after graduation. Her parents were both successful professionals, her father a surgeon, her mother a university professor. I noticed immediately how she surveyed our modest home with a slightly furrowed brow, how she referred to Portland as quaint, how she asked. Michael pointed questions about his career plans and potential earnings as an attorney. But he was so clearly smitten that I kept my concerns to myself. "She's ambitious," Julia observed after meeting her. "Let's hope she's kind, too." Michael and Amanda graduated with honors. He was accepted to Columbia Law School, another prestigious, expensive institution. Amanda headed to Johns Hopkins for her master's program. They maintained a long-distance relationship, flying back and forth between New York and Baltimore on weekends, planning their futures together. By this point, I had scaled back to just one nursing job, but the years of physical work had taken their toll. My back ached constantly from lifting patients. My knees protested after long shifts. Still, I sent what I could to help with Michael's law school expenses. He had loans too, of course, but I was determined to minimize his debt. "You'll have enough to pay off when you graduate," I told him. "Let me help while I can." Julia was diagnosed with ovarian cancer during Michael's second year of law school. It was advanced by the time they found it, hiding in her body like a silent invader. "Don't tell Michael," she insisted from her hospital bed. "He needs to focus on his studies. We'll tell him it's something less serious, a benign cyst or something." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Every other weekend for 6 months, I drove Julia to chemotherapy appointments, held her hand through the nausea and hair loss, and reassured Michael during our phone calls that his aunt was doing fine, just a minor health issue, nothing to worry about. The cancer went into remission briefly, then returned with a vengeance 3 months later. This time, there was no hiding it. Michael flew home for a weekend, shocked to find his vibrant aunt so diminished. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, hurt and anger in his voice. "Because you couldn't have done anything except worry," Julia told him matter-of-factly. "And worry doesn't cure cancer. Go back to school, finish strong, and make me proud. That's what I want." Michael returned to Columbia, calling daily for updates. Amanda sent a tasteful flower arrangement and a card with a generic message about healing thoughts. Julia placed the card on her bedside table but gave the flowers to the nurse's station. "Too much scent," she explained, though I suspected she simply didn't warm to the gesture. 2 months later, Julia was gone. The small family we had cobbled together was even smaller now. At the funeral, Michael stood tall in a dark suit, greeting the many people whose lives Julia had touched through her marketing career and volunteer work. Amanda stood beside him, appropriate and composed in a black dress, her hand resting lightly on his arm. I moved through the day in a fog, wondering how it was possible to lose so much in one lifetime. It was a week after the funeral when Julia's attorney called me into his office. "Your sister was quite savvy with her investments," Mr. Greenberg explained, sliding a portfolio across his desk, "and she updated her will after her diagnosis." I stared at the numbers in disbelief. Julia had accumulated nearly $2.7 million through smart investments, property holdings, and a substantial life insurance policy. She had left everything to me, with a letter explaining her wishes. "Dear Elaine," it read in her familiar handwriting, "I've watched you give everything to Michael, your time, your energy, your financial security. You've been the most devoted mother I've ever known. Now it's your turn. This money is for you. Not for Michael's loans or his first house or his future children's college funds. For once in your life, I want you to be selfish. Travel to Italy. Retire early. Buy a beachfront condo and drink wine while watching the sunset. Live the life that you and David dreamed about before it all changed. Michael is an adult now with a brilliant career ahead of him. He'll be fine. It's time for you to be more than fine. It's time for you to thrive. Promise me you won't squander this chance. All my love, Julia. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it into my purse, my hands trembling. Mr. Greenberg cleared his throat. Julia was very specific that you should use these funds for your own well-being, he said gently. She mentioned that you have a tendency to put others' needs before your own. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Julia had given me a gift beyond measure, not just financial security, but permission to put myself first after a lifetime of sacrifice. I didn't tell Michael about the inheritance immediately. Part of me was afraid he would see it as a solution to his mounting student loans, which now exceeded $200,000 between his undergraduate and law school education. The other part of me was still processing what this windfall meant for my future. For the first time in decades, I had choices. Michael graduated from Columbia Law School the following spring. Amanda, now finished with her master's program, stood proudly beside him in the graduation photos, both of them beaming with accomplishment and promise. They announced their engagement that same day, with plans for a wedding the following year. Michael accepted a position at a prestigious law firm in Washington, D.C., focusing on immigration law, not the most lucrative field, but one he was passionate about. Amanda secured a job with the World Bank. They rented an expensive apartment in a trendy neighborhood, furnishing it with sleek, modern pieces that Amanda selected with meticulous care. I continued working at the hospital, though I reduced my hours and stopped taking the most physically demanding shifts. I began researching trips to Italy, looking at cooking classes in Tuscany and art tours in Florence. I consulted with a financial advisor who helped me create a secure retirement plan with Julia's money. I even looked at condos in a 55-plus community near the Oregon coast, dreaming of morning walks on the beach. Then came the phone call that would change everything. Mom, Michael's voice sounded strained. I need to talk to you about something. The apartment building where I'd lived for the past 15 years had been sold. The new owners were converting the units to luxury condos, and all current tenants had 60 days to vacate. At 67, the prospect of finding affordable housing in Portland's inflated market was daunting. Move in with us, Michael suggested after I explained my situation. We have that spare bedroom that's just sitting empty. It makes no sense for you to scramble for an apartment when we have the space. I hesitated. Are you sure Amanda would be comfortable with that arrangement? Of course, he assured me. We've already discussed it. It's the perfect solution. You can take your time finding a new place, save on rent for a while, maybe even retire a little earlier. I thought of Julia's letter, of her instruction to put myself first. But this was a temporary situation, I reasoned. A few months at most until I found a suitable apartment, and it would give me a chance to spend more time with Michael, to get to know Amanda better as a daughter-in-law. So I packed up my life in Portland, selling most of my furniture, donating clothes and books, keeping only what would fit in the guest bedroom of their Washington, D.C. apartment. I gave notice at the hospital, hugged my colleagues goodbye, and boarded a plane to start this new temporary chapter. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't flying toward a solution. I was flying straight into a storm that would test my love for my son, my sense of self-worth, and every sacrifice I had ever made. Washington, D.C. in autumn was nothing like Portland. The humidity clung to my skin like a damp cloth, even as the temperature dropped. The city moved at a relentless pace. Politicians, lobbyists, and young professionals rushing between meetings with a sense of self-importance that made me feel invisible as I navigated the unfamiliar streets. Michael and Amanda's apartment was in DuPont Circle, an elegant building with a doorman and a small manicured courtyard. My first night there, I lay awake in the guest bedroom, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of sirens and late-night revelers, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. The guest bedroom was tastefully decorated in neutral tones, beige walls, white bedding, abstract art in muted colors. It looked like a page from a home design magazine, beautiful but impersonal. Amanda had cleared half the closet for my clothes, which now looked shabby and out of place among the sophisticated surroundings. "We can take you shopping," she offered, with a tight smile when she noticed me hanging up my well-worn cardigans. "Update your wardrobe a bit. My treat." I declined politely, sensing the criticism beneath the offer. My clothes had served me well at the hospital, comfortable for 12-hour shifts and resilient through countless washes. They might not be fashionable, but they were practical. Still, I found myself changing outfits multiple times before emerging from my room each morning, suddenly self-conscious in a way I hadn't been in years. The first few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment. Michael left for the law firm by 7 a.m. each morning and rarely returned before 8 p.m. Amanda's hours at the World Bank were similarly demanding. I spent my days exploring the neighborhood, visiting museums, thankfully free in D.C., and searching online for apartments. In the evenings, I prepared dinner, grateful to contribute in some small way to their hectic lives. "Mom, you don't have to cook every night," Michael insisted after coming home to find me plating chicken piccata, his childhood favorite. "We usually just order in or grab something on the way home." "I don't mind," I assured him. "It gives me something to do, and home-cooked meals are healthier than takeout." Amanda picked at her food, taking small, deliberate bites. "It's very homey," she said, in a tone that made it clear this wasn't a compliment. "But Michael and I are trying to cut back on carbs, and I'm sensitive to dairy." After that, I stuck to protein and vegetables, carefully avoiding pasta, bread, and anything with cream or cheese. I downloaded recipes for dairy-free, low-carb meals, determined to make myself useful without stepping on toes. But more often than not, my carefully prepared dinners sat untouched as Michael and Amanda worked late or made last-minute plans with colleagues. One evening, about a month into my stay, they hosted a dinner party for 6 of their friends, other young professionals in sleek business attire who discussed politics and global economics with passionate intensity. I offered to help with the preparations, but Amanda shook her head. "We've ordered catering," she explained, arranging elegant cheese platters on the dining table. "But maybe you could make yourself scarce tonight. These are work colleagues, and we'll be discussing some sensitive projects." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you'd be bored anyway." I retreated to my room with a book and a cup of tea, trying to ignore the laughter and animated conversation that filtered through the walls. I felt like an intruder in my son's life, a relic from a past he was rapidly outgrowing. Throughout the evening, I could hear occasional references to Michael's mom staying with us, followed by hushed tones and what sounded like sympathetic murmurs. The apartment hunt wasn't going well. Washington, D.C. rental prices were astronomical compared to Portland, and even the most modest one-bedroom apartments in safe neighborhoods were well beyond what my nurse's pension could comfortably afford. Without touching Julia's inheritance, which I was still keeping private, I would need to either find work in D.C. or settle for a lengthy commute from a more affordable suburb. When I mentioned possibly looking for nursing positions in the area, Michael frowned. "Mom, you're 67. You should be thinking about retirement, not starting over in a new hospital." "I've worked my entire adult life," I reminded him. "I'm not sure I know how to stop. Besides, my pension won't cover rent in this city." "Then stay with us longer," he suggested, though I noticed he glanced toward Amanda's office before making the offer. "At least until you figure things out." The next day, I decided to surprise them by deep cleaning the apartment. Years of hospital work had made me meticulous about sanitation, and I noticed the dust collecting on baseboards and the soap scum building up in the shower. I spent hours scrubbing, polishing, and organizing, wanting to show my appreciation for their hospitality. Amanda came home earlier than usual, stopping short when she saw me on my hands and knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor. "What are you doing?" she asked, setting her designer handbag on the counter. "Just a bit of deep cleaning," I explained, sitting back on my heels. I noticed the grout was getting discolored. She pressed her lips together. "We have a cleaning service that comes every other week. You didn't need to do this." "I don't mind. I wanted to help out." "We don't need that kind of help," she interrupted, an edge to her voice. "It makes me uncomfortable having you clean like what?" I asked, something cold settling in my stomach. "Like a housekeeper," she finished, at least having the grace to look embarrassed. "You're Michael's mother. You should be relaxing, enjoying your retirement, not scrubbing floors." I stood up slowly, my knees protesting after hours on the hard tile. I've never been good at sitting idle, and I was raised to contribute when I'm a guest in someone's home. Amanda's phone chimed with a text message, and the conversation was mercifully cut short. But as she walked away, I heard her mutter, "You're not a guest. You're family. There's a difference." The words should have been comforting, but something in her tone left me unsettled. That weekend, Michael and Amanda attended a wedding in Martha's vineyard, leaving me alone in the apartment. I took the opportunity to video chat with my friend Diane back in Portland, finally able to speak freely without worrying about being overheard. "How's the mother-in-law experience going?" Diane asked, after we'd caught up on neighborhood gossip. She'd been my neighbor for 15 years, and we'd grown close after Julia's death. I hesitated, not wanting to speak ill of Michael or Amanda. Different than I expected. They're both so busy with their careers. I hardly see them. Diane's pixelated face creased with concern. "And the apartment hunting? Any luck?" I shook my head. "Everything's so expensive here. I'm starting to think I might need to dip into some savings I've been holding on to." "The inheritance from Julia?" Diane was one of the few people who knew about the money. "I thought you were saving that for your dreams. Italy, remember? That coastal condo?" "Dreams change," I said softly. "Right now, I just need my own space again." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment, looking at the stylish furnishings that reflected nothing of my son or the home we'd shared in Portland. There were no family photos, no mementos from his childhood, no evidence of the life we'd eat. Built together after David died, it was as if Michael had shed his past like an outgrown skin, emerging as someone new and unfamiliar. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if moving to DC had been a mistake. Perhaps I should have used some of Julia's money immediately to secure a new apartment in Portland, where I had friends, familiar haunts, a community. Instead, I'd leapt at the chance to be near Michael, assuming that proximity would strengthen our bond. The revelation came on a Tuesday evening, 3 days after Michael and Amanda returned from the wedding. I had gone to bed early with a migraine, a leftover affliction from years of night shifts and stress. Around midnight, I woke disoriented, my head pounding. The apartment was dark, but I could hear voices from the living room. Michael and Amanda had returned from whatever event had kept them out late. I shuffled to the bathroom for my medication, trying to move quietly in the darkness. As I passed, through the hallway, their conversation drifted clearly through the partially open door of the living room. "Have to talk about this, Michael." Amanda's voice was insistent. "It's been nearly 2 months, and she's showing no signs of moving. Out. What am I supposed to do? She's my mother. She raised me alone after Dad died." "And that's admirable. It is." Amanda's tone softened slightly. "But we're newly married, building our careers, thinking about starting a family. We can't have your mother living with us indefinitely." "It's temporary," Michael argued, though he sounded weary, as if they'd had this conversation before. "Just until she finds a place she can afford." "That's the problem," Amanda countered. She can't afford to live in D.C. on a nurse's pension. Not in any neighborhood where she'd be safe. She needs to consider other options. Maybe a retirement community in a more affordable area. I froze in the hallway, my migraine forgotten. They were discussing my future as if I were a problem to be solved, not a person with agency and desires of my own. She's not ready for a retirement home, Michael protested. She's independent, active. There are very nice active adult communities, Amanda persisted. And they're much more affordable than trying to rent here. I've been doing some research. There's one in Delaware that looks promising. Delaware. They wanted to ship me off to Delaware, hours away from the son I'd sacrificed everything for. I can't just suggest she move to another state, Michael said, but his resistance was weakening. I could hear it in his voice. Why not? She moved across the country for you without hesitation. Clearly she's willing to relocate. There was a pause. Then Amanda's voice took on a harder edge. Look, I've been patient, Michael. I've welcomed your mother into our home, adjusted our routines, given up my personal space. But this was supposed to be temporary. I can't keep living like this. Like what? Michael asked, and I heard the defensiveness creeping into his tone. She's hardly ever in your way. She cooks, she's quiet, she spends most of her time in her room? That's just it. Amanda's voice rose slightly before she caught herself. It's awkward having her here all the time, tiptoeing around trying to make herself useful. I feel like I'm constantly being watched and evaluated. This is supposed to be our home, Michael. Our sanctuary after stressful workdays. Instead, it feels like we're living with a what? Michael's tone was flat now, resigned. A burden? Amanda finished, the word hanging in the air like a slap. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Your mother is becoming a financial and emotional burden we might never shake if we don't set boundaries now. Do you really want to still be supporting her 10 years from now? 20? I must have made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, a small gasp of pain, because suddenly the conversation stopped. I heard movement, footsteps approaching the hallway. I retreated quickly to my room, closing the door silently behind me. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my migraine medication in the dark, swallowing the pills dry because I couldn't bear to face them in the kitchen. A burden. Amanda had called me a burden, the woman who had worked herself to exhaustion to give her husband the best medical care possible, who had sacrificed her own dreams to raise Michael alone, who had dipped into her retirement to help with his education. Now I was nothing more than dead weight to be shed, a problem to be solved by shipping me off to Delaware. Worse, Michael hadn't defended me. He'd offered token protests, but ultimately he seemed to accept Amanda's assessment. The son I'd centered my entire life around for 35 years saw me as an obligation, not a cherished parent. I lay in bed, tears sliding silently into my pillow as the full impact of their conversation washed over me. Every sacrifice, every late-night shift, every missed opportunity in service to Michael's future, all of it suddenly felt hollow, even foolish. I had given everything, and in return, I was considered a burden. Morning came, and with it, a strange clarity. The migraine had faded to a dull throb, but something else had crystallized in its place. Resolve. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, choosing one of my better outfits, a navy blue dress Julia had given me for my birthday years ago. I applied a touch of lipstick and mascara, then squared my shoulders before heading to the kitchen. Michael and Amanda were already there. Amanda sipping a green smoothie while checking emails on her phone, Michael gulping coffee as he gathered his briefcase. They both looked up when I entered, their expressions carefully neutral. If they suspected I'd overheard their conversation, they weren't acknowledging it. "Good morning," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I've made a decision. I'm going back to Portland next week." Michael's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Portland? But what about finding an apartment here? I've realized DC isn't for me, I said simply. I miss my friends, my community. I'll find something in Portland, even if it's not in my old neighborhood. But how will you afford it? Amanda asked, setting down her phone. Wasn't that the whole problem to begin with? I met her gaze directly. I have my ways. I've been saving more than you might think. A flicker of something, relief, guilt, curiosity, crossed her face before she masked it with concern. If you're sure that's what you want, we just want what's best for you. What's best for me? The phrase echoed in my mind, so at odds with last night's conversation about burdens and boundaries. They didn't want what was best for me. They wanted what was most convenient for them. I know exactly what I want, I said, reaching for an apple from the fruit bowl. And it's time I put myself first for a change. As they gathered their things to leave for work, making vague promises to talk more about my plans that evening, I watched them with new eyes. My son, so polished in his tailored suit, so far removed from the passionate, idealistic boy who wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves. My daughter-in-law, brilliant and ambitious, but cold in ways that had nothing to do with intelligence. Neither of them knew about Julia's inheritance. Neither of them understood that I had options beyond their limited imagination. For 35 years, I had lived solely for Michael's benefit. Now, with Julia's voice echoing in my memory, it's time for you to be more than fine. It's time for you to thrive. I was ready to make a change that would shock them both to their core. The burden was about to lift herself. That afternoon, I walked to a small cafe 3 blocks from Michael and Amanda's apartment. The place was tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Nothing like the sleek coffee chains that dotted the neighborhood. I'd discovered it during my first week in DC and had been drawn to its unpretentious warmth. The barista, a young woman with vibrant blue hair named Zoe, greeted me by name. The usual, Mrs. Patterson? Yes, please. And I'll need the Wi-Fi password. Today. She scribbled it on my cup with a flourish. Working on something exciting? Life-changing, I replied with a small smile. I settled into a worn leather armchair by the window, opened my laptop, and logged into my banking portal. Julia's inheritance sat untouched in separate accounts from my modest pension and savings. $2.7 million. A number that still didn't feel real, even after months of knowing about it. While waiting for my secure connection to establish, I pulled out Julia's letter from my wallet. The paper had grown soft from frequent handling, the creases threatening to tear. I traced my finger over her handwriting, hearing her voice in my head. It's time for you to be selfish. This money is for you. What would being selfish even look like after decades of putting others first? The question had haunted me since Mr. Greenberg's office. I'd dreamed of Italy, of a coastal condo, of finally having time to read all the books I'd set aside over the years. Simple pleasures that now seemed hollow in the face of my son's betrayal. My secure banking app finally connected, and I stared at the balance. $2,143,892.16. The earnings from Julia's smart investments had continued to grow even after her death. I clicked through the various accounts, considering my options. A young couple at a nearby table caught my attention. They were hunched over a laptop together, the woman's expression tense as the man scrolled through what looked like a spreadsheet. We're never going to get out from under this, the woman sighed, loud enough for me to overhear. Between your loans and mine, we're looking at payments until we're 50. I know, he replied, running a hand through his hair. But what choice do we have? We can't default. Student loans, the modern-day albatross. I thought about Michael and Amanda's education, Georgetown, Columbia, Johns Hopkins. Prestigious institutions with price tags to match. Michael had mentioned his own loans in passing, but I realized I had no idea how much debt they carried between them. I opened a new browser tab and searched for average student loan debt for law school graduates. The numbers made me wince. $160,000 to $200,000 for top private law schools. Then I searched for masters in international development programs. Another $70,000 to $100,000 for elite institutions. If Michael and Amanda were average, they could be carrying close to $300,000 in combined student debt. No wonder they were concerned about supporting me. They were likely drowning in monthly payments themselves. A new idea began to take shape, one that wasn't about Italy or coastal condos. One that would be both a final act of maternal love and a powerful statement about how deeply their words had cut me. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Greenberg's office in Portland. "Elaine," he greeted me warmly, "how's Washington treating you?" "Not well," I admitted. "I'm coming back to Portland next week, but I need some information first." I explained what I wanted to do, expecting him to try to talk me out of it. Instead, after a thoughtful pause, he said, "Julia would appreciate the irony. It's still putting someone else first, but with a twist she'd enjoy." "Can you arrange it anonymously?" I asked. "At least initially?" "I can. It's your money, Elaine. You can. Do whatever you want with it." After hanging up, I opened a new email and began composing a message to my friend Diane in Portland. She owned a small property management company and had helped me find my apartment after David died. "I'm coming home," I wrote. "And I need a place of my own, ASAP. Not just any place, something special. Remember those waterfront condos we used to walk past on our evening strolls? The ones we joked were for lottery winners and tech executives? See if there's one available? Price is no longer an obstacle." Zoe stopped by to refresh my tea. "Making progress?" she asked, nodding at my laptop. "I'm taking back my life," I told her, surprised by the fierce joy in my voice. "Good for you," she grinned. "Need anything else?" "Just one thing," I said, pulling out my debit card. "I'd like to pay for everyone's orders for the next hour." Her eyes widened. "That could get expensive." "I know exactly what I'm doing," I replied. That evening, for the first time since arriving in D.C., I skipped making dinner. Instead, I changed into a dress I'd purchased but never worn, a deep burgundy wrap style that Julia had insisted suited me. I applied makeup carefully, put on the pearl earrings David had given me for our 5th anniversary, and ordered a car to take me to a small Italian restaurant I'd discovered during my neighborhood explorations. The host seated me at a table by the window, where I could watch the evening pedestrian traffic while sipping a glass of Chianti. I ordered the handmade pappardelle with wild mushrooms, savoring each bite while mentally composing a list of what needed to be done before my departure. When Michael called around 7:30, concern in his voice, I answered calmly, "Mom, where are you? We came home and you weren't here. Is everything okay? I'm having dinner at Marcella's. The pappardelle is excellent. You and Amanda should try it sometime." "You're out at a restaurant. Alone?" He sounded confused, as if the concept was foreign to him. "I've been dining alone since before you were born, Michael," I reminded him gently. "I'm quite comfortable with my own company. But we need to talk about your plans." This sudden decision to return to Portland— "Nothing to discuss," I interrupted, something I rarely did with my son. "My mind is made up. My flight is booked for next Monday. We can talk more when you get home, but right now I'm enjoying my dinner." I ended the call before he could protest further. The waiter approached with dessert menu in hand, and I ordered the tiramisu and an espresso. A small rebellion, perhaps, but it felt significant. When I finally returned to the apartment around 9:30, Michael and Amanda were waiting in the living room, their expressions a mix of concern and irritation. "We've been waiting for hours," Amanda said, her tone making it clear this was an inconvenience. "Michael wanted to talk about your decision." I wanted to make sure you're not making a hasty choice based on feeling uncomfortable here, Michael added. We can make adjustments, find ways to give you more privacy. I set my purse down and regarded them both calmly. My decision isn't hasty, it's actually long overdue. But the cost of living in Portland, Michael began, is no longer a concern, I finished for him. I've made arrangements. Amanda's eyebrows arched. What kind of arrangements? Did you find a roommate situation? No, I said simply. I'm buying a condo. The silence that followed was profound. Michael recovered first. Buying? Mom, how can you possibly afford to buy property in this market? This was the moment, the crossroads between continuing the charade and revealing the truth. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my mind dozens of times since overhearing them, weighing how much to disclose and when. Your Aunt Julia left me money when she died, I said, watching their expressions carefully. Quite a lot of money, actually. What? Michael's voice rose in disbelief. You never mentioned this. How much are we talking about? I noted his choice of words, we instead of you, as if the inheritance might somehow involve him. It confirmed I was making the right decision. That's not important right now, I deflected. What matters is that I have enough to live comfortably, on my own terms. I've already connected with a real estate agent in Portland who's showing me properties virtually tomorrow. Amanda's expression had shifted from surprised to calculating. But why didn't you tell us about this inheritance months ago? We've been worried about how you'd afford housing, whether we'd need to support you. Exactly, I interrupted, my voice gentle but firm. You've been worried about me becoming a burden on your finances. I heard your conversation the other night, Amanda. Every word of it. Her face paled, and Michael looked stricken. Mom, that wasn't... We didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said quietly. And it's all right. It forced me to realize something important. I've spent my entire adult life putting your needs first, Michael. I worked nights and weekends so you could have opportunities. I dipped into my retirement to help with your education. I moved across the country to be close to you. And somehow, despite all that, I've become an inconvenience in your life. That's not fair, Amanda protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But it's how I feel, and Julia's gift has given me the freedom to prioritize my feelings for once. So you're just leaving? Michael asked, sounding suddenly like the little boy who'd been afraid I wouldn't come home from late hospital shifts. I'm starting a new chapter, I corrected him. And before I go, I have one last gesture to make. My final act as the mother who always put you first. They exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unsure where this was heading. And truthfully, so was I. The plan I'd formulated at the cafe was audacious, possibly even foolish. But as Julia had written, it was time for me to be selfish. Even if my version of selfishness still involved my son. I would use part of Julia's money to free Michael and Amanda from their student debt, anonymously at first, then revealing myself as their benefactor just before I left. It would be both a gift and a statement. Here is what a burden looks like. Here is what a mother's love looks like, even when it's not deserved. And then I would walk away, flying first class to Portland, and into my new life, unburdened at last. The next morning, I met with Mr. Greenberg via video call from a private room at the local library. The cafe was too public for what we needed to discuss, and I couldn't risk Michael or Amanda overhearing. I've made the necessary inquiries, Mr. Greenberg said, adjusting his glasses. Based on the loan servicing companies you identified from their mail, we can proceed with the payments. But Elaine, are you absolutely certain about this? We're talking about approximately $320,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. More than I'd anticipated, but still well within my means. I'm certain, I replied. Can you arrange for the payments to be processed by Friday? I want them to... Receive the notifications before I leave on Monday. It can be done. I'll set it up as anonymous donations through the Julia Patterson Foundation. We'll create it specifically for this purpose. The loans will be paid in full, but they won't know the source until you choose to tell them. I nodded, a strange sense of calm settling over me. Perfect. After finalizing the details with Mr. Greenberg, I had another video call, this time with Diane in Portland. She'd found 3 waterfront condos that met my specifications, and she guided me through virtual tours of each. The second one, a 2-bedroom corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River, made my heart skip. That's the one, I said, as she showed me the spacious kitchen with its granite countertops and the master bedroom, with its panoramic water views. Can you make an offer today? Full asking price. Diane's eyes widened. Are you sure? There might be room to negotiate. I'm done negotiating in my life, I interrupted gently. The price is fair, and I want to move forward immediately. The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparations. I donated most of the clothes I'd brought to D.C., keeping only favorites and pieces with sentimental value. I ordered new furniture for the condo, scheduled to be delivered the day after my arrival. I booked my first-class ticket to Portland, Michael, and Amanda walked on eggshells around me, clearly unsettled by my newfound independence and the revelation about Julia's inheritance. They attempted normal conversation at dinner, asked polite questions about my plans, but the tension remained palpable. On Friday morning, I woke early and prepared a special breakfast: blueberry pancakes, crispy bacon, fresh fruit, and coffee. It was the kind of breakfast I used to make for Michael on his birthdays when he was growing up, simple but made with love. The aroma drew them both to the kitchen, Amanda still in her silk pajamas, Michael in sweatpants and a t-shirt from his law school days. "What's the occasion?" Michael asked, eyeing the spread with surprise. "My last weekend here," I said simply. I wanted to do something nice. We ate in relative silence, the pancakes disappearing quickly despite the awkwardness. I was just pouring second cups of coffee when both their phones chimed simultaneously with email alerts. Amanda checked hers first, her forehead creasing in confusion. "That's weird. It says my student loan account needs my attention." She tapped through screens, her expression shifting from puzzlement to shock. "What the—" She looked up, face pale. "My loans are showing a 0 balance." Michael grabbed his phone, navigating to his own accounts. His reaction mirrored Amanda's. Confusion, disbelief, then a kind of dazed wonder. "Mine too, all of them, paid in full." He looked up at me, eyes narrowing in sudden suspicion. "Mom, did you—" I sipped my coffee calmly. "Did I what?" "Our student loans, they've been paid off. All of them. Nearly $320,000 just gone." I arranged my face in an expression of innocent surprise. How extraordinary. Perhaps there was a clerical error. Amanda was frantically scrolling through her phone. "No, there's a notification here. Your education debt has been satisfied in full by a donation from the Julia Patterson Foundation." Who or what is the Julia Patterson Foundation? I set down my coffee cup, marveling at the steadiness of my hand. How strange that it would have Julia's name. Michael was staring at me now, realization dawning. "Mom, did you do this? Is this what you meant by one last gesture?" "The timing is certainly coincidental," I acknowledged, beginning to clear the breakfast dishes. "But as Amanda pointed out when I arrived, my nursing pension is quite modest. How could I possibly pay off over $300,000 in student loans?" "But Julia's inheritance," Michael began. "Would I really spend that kind of money on people who consider me a burden?" I asked quietly, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Amanda set down her phone, her expression calculating. "If you did do this, why? Why now, right before you leave?" I dried my hands on a kitchen towel, considering how to respond. Hypothetically speaking, if I had done this, it would be because despite everything, I still love my son. And because I wanted you both to understand what it truly means to be a burden. Or rather, what it means to lift one. The silence that followed was profound. Michael's eyes filled with tears, and even Amanda looked shaken. "Mom, we never meant—" Michael began. But I held up my hand. "Whether you did this or not," Amanda interjected, her voice tentative, "we owe whoever did an enormous debt of gratitude. This changes everything for us. We can think about buying a house now, starting a family sooner." "How wonderful for you," I said, meaning it sincerely despite the circumstances. "Financial freedom is a precious gift." "But if you did this," Michael persisted, "that must mean Julia left you much more than you've let on. Millions, not thousands." I smiled enigmatically. "Does the amount really matter? What matters is how one uses whatever resources they have." Amanda's phone rang, her mother calling from San Francisco. She excused herself to take the call, leaving Michael and me alone in the kitchen. The moment she left, he leaned forward, voice urgent. "Mom, please be straight with me. Did you pay off our loans?" I met his gaze steadily. "Would it change anything if I did?" "Of course it would. It would mean—" He stopped, struggling to articulate what it would mean. "That I'm not a financial burden after all?" I suggested gently. "That I have value beyond cooking and cleaning for you. That perhaps I deserve to be treated with more consideration than I've been shown?" His face crumpled. "I never thought of you as a burden. Those were Amanda's words, not mine." "But you didn't contradict her," I pointed out. "You didn't defend me. You've been my whole world for 35 years, Michael. I sacrificed everything for you, my career advancement, my retirement security, sometimes even my health. And in return, you allowed your wife to suggest shipping me off to Delaware at the first sign of inconvenience." "I was trying to balance everyone's needs," he said, but the excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. "No," I corrected him. "You were prioritizing her comfort over my dignity." Amanda returned, her expression triumphant. "My mother's ecstatic. She says with our loans gone, we should accelerate our plans to start a family. She's already talking about coming to help when the baby arrives." The irony wasn't lost on me. Amanda welcoming her mother's assistance while finding my presence. So burdensome? But I held my tongue, clearing the last of the breakfast dishes. Over the weekend, their attitudes toward me shifted dramatically. Amanda suggested shopping trips, offered to help me pack, even proposed dinner at an upscale restaurant to celebrate your new beginning. Michael hovered attentively, asking about my condo, offering to help set up utilities remotely, promising to visit Portland soon. The cynic in me noted how their behavior changed once they suspected I had significant financial resources. The mother in me wanted to believe their gestures were genuine, born of remorse and renewed appreciation. Sunday evening, as I finished packing the last of my belongings, Michael knocked on my bedroom door. "Mom, can we talk?" I invited him in, and he sat awkwardly on the edge of the bed, looking around at the now bare room. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About sacrificing everything for me. About not defending you." He swallowed. Hard. "You're right. I've taken you for granted. After Dad died, you became a constant in my life. Always there, always supporting, always giving. I never stopped to consider what it cost you." "It was my choice," I said gently. "Every sacrifice, every late night, every extra shift. I did it willingly, because I love you more than anything in this world, which makes it worse that I let you down," he said, voice catching. "Whether you paid off our loans or not, and I'm pretty sure you did, I need you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. And I don't want you to leave like this, with things unresolved between us." I reached out and took his hand, noting how much larger it was than mine now. How the years had transformed the small boy I'd raised into this complicated man. Some distance might be good for us, I suggested. Give us both time to redefine our relationship as adults, with clearer boundaries and expectations. But you'll still be part of our lives? He asked, suddenly looking younger, vulnerable, Of course, I assured him. Just on different terms than before. Later that night, I heard Michael and Amanda arguing in their bedroom, their voices rising despite obvious attempts to keep quiet. Can't just let her walk away, Michael was insisting. If she really has millions, it's her money, Amanda countered. We have no claim to it. And after how we've treated her— You mean how you've treated her? Michael corrected sharply. This whole burden narrative came from you, not me. Their voices dropped again, and I moved away from the wall, not wanting to eavesdrop further. I'd heard enough to confirm what I already knew. The revelation of Julia's inheritance had changed how they viewed me, but not necessarily for the right reasons. Monday morning arrived with a sense of finality. My flight was scheduled for 1 p.m. and a car would pick me up at 10 a.m. I left a card on the kitchen counter, a simple thank you note for their hospitality, with no mention of the loan payments or the foundation that bore Julia's name. As the car pulled away from the curb, Michael and Amanda stood on the sidewalk, waving goodbye. I waved back, feeling a complex mix of emotions: sadness, relief, vindication, hope. The burden had lifted herself, and she was flying first class to her future. The flight from D.C. to Portland marked my first time flying first class. The spacious seat, attentive service, and champagne before takeoff felt surreal after decades of economy travel, when every dollar saved meant one more for Michael's education. As the plane lifted into the clouds, I felt a physical sensation of leaving behind not just a city, but a version of myself, the self-sacrificing mother who measured her worth by what she gave to others. "Is this your first time in first class?" asked the businessman beside me, noticing my wide-eyed appreciation of the amenities. "First time for many things," I replied with a smile. Diane met me at Portland International Airport, rushing forward to envelope me in a hug that smelled of her signature gardenia perfume. "Look at you!" she exclaimed, stepping back to survey me. "Something's different. You're glowing." "Freedom suits me," I said simply. She drove me directly to my new condo, chattering about neighborhood restaurants, the building's amenities, and the walking paths along the river. I half listened, mesmerized by the sight of Portland's familiar skyline against the backdrop of Mount Hood in the distance. This city had been my home for over 30 years, but I was seeing it with new eyes, not as Michael's mother or David's widow, but as Elaine Patterson, woman of independent means. The condo exceeded my expectations. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating hardwood floors and granite countertops. The previous owners had painted the walls a soft gray that complemented the river views, making the space feel both elegant and serene. "The furniture will be delivered tomorrow," Diane reminded me, handing over a set of keys. "But I stocked the fridge with essentials, and there's an air mattress set up in the main bedroom for tonight." I walked to the windows, watching a cargo ship move slowly downriver. "It's perfect," I said, my voice catching. "Thank you for making this happen so quickly. After everything you've been through, you deserve something special," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "Now, I've made dinner. Reservations at Riverside Grill to celebrate. My treat, no arguments." Over dinner, I shared the full story of my time in D.C., including the details of the loan payoff that I'd only hinted at in our previous conversations. "You paid off their loans? After how they treated you?" Diane's fork clattered against her plate. "Elaine, that's foolish," I suggested, sipping my wine. I was going to say incredibly generous, but maybe a bit of both. She shook her head in wonder. "Will you tell them it was definitely you? Or let them keep guessing?" I smiled. They'll figure it out. The Julia Patterson Foundation was hardly subtle. And what now? What does life look like for Elaine 2.0? It was a question I'd been asking myself since making the decision to leave DC. What did I want my life to look like now that I was accountable only to myself? Travel, certainly, I began. Italy first, like Julia wanted for me. I've already started researching cooking classes in Tuscany for this fall. Perfect, Diane nodded approvingly. What else? I hesitated, then shared the idea that had been forming since the flight. I'm thinking about going back to school. Diane's eyebrows shot up. For nursing? I thought your back couldn't handle the physical demands anymore. Not nursing. Art history, or maybe creative writing. Something completely different, just for the joy of learning. I love it, she declared, raising her wine glass in a toast. To Elaine's Renaissance. Renaissance, I repeated, clinking my glass against hers. The word felt right. A rebirth, a cultural flowering after a dark period. The next morning brought a flurry of deliveries. The furniture I'd ordered online arrived piece by piece. A plush sectional sofa in slate blue, a glass dining table with elegant chairs, a king-sized bed with a tufted headboard in soft cream fabric. By afternoon, my condo had transformed from an empty shell to a home that reflected my emerging taste, not constrained by practicality or others' preferences. I spent the first week settling in, exploring my new neighborhood, and figuring out what daily life looked like when structured entirely around my own desires. I discovered a farmer's market on Thursdays where I could buy fresh flowers for my dining table, an extravagance I'd never allowed myself before. I found a small, independent bookstore with reading nooks and excellent coffee. I joined a walking group that met 3 mornings a week to stroll along the riverfront trail. On impulse, I signed up for a watercolor class at the local community center. My first attempts were laughable, misshapen fruit, perspectives that defied physics, but I found myself looking forward to the Wednesday evening sessions with an almost childlike anticipation. There was something freeing about being a beginner, about creating without expectations or judgments. 3 weeks after my arrival, the first email from Michael appeared in my inbox. I'd been expecting it, though it came sooner than I'd anticipated. Mom, I hope you're settling in well in Portland. Amanda and I have been talking a lot since you left. We confirmed that the Julia Patterson Foundation was created the day before our loans were paid off and dissolves next month. It doesn't take a law degree to figure out what happened. I don't know how to adequately thank you for what you did. The financial relief is enormous, but more than that, the gesture itself has made me reconsider everything. I've been selfish and ungrateful. I allowed Amanda's perspective to overshadow what I know to be true. That you have always put my needs before your own, often at great personal cost. Amanda wants me to ask about your plans for the rest of Julia's inheritance. I refused. Whatever you choose to do with your money is your business, not ours. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. I'd like to come visit, if you're open to it. Not to make demands or ask for anything, but to see your new place, and maybe begin to repair what's been broken between us. With love and regret, Michael I read the email 3 times, noting both his apology and the revealing mention of Amanda's continued interest in the rest of Julia's inheritance. Some patterns were deeply ingrained, it seemed. After careful consideration, I replied, Michael, thank you for your email. Portland is lovely this time of year, and I'm enjoying rediscovering the city. Yes, the foundation was my final gift to you and Amanda. I wanted you both to understand what it means to have a burden lifted, and hopefully, to recognize the difference between being a burden and being burdened. I appreciate your apology and your respect for my financial privacy. I would welcome a visit, but with one condition. I'd prefer to see you alone the first time. We have much to discuss, and I think it would be more productive without Amanda present. Let me know what dates might work for you. Love, Mom. His response came within an hour. He would fly in the following weekend, alone as requested. I felt a mix of apprehension and hope at the prospect of seeing him. The hurt hadn't vanished, but it had dulled enough that reconciliation seemed possible. In the days before Michael's visit, I had a long conversation with Mr. Greenberg about my financial future. We restructured some investments, set up a travel fund for my Italy trip in the fall, and discussed options for philanthropy. Julia would be proud of how you're handling this, he told me near the end of our meeting. You've honored her wishes by finally putting yourself first. Not entirely, I admitted, thinking of the loan payments. I'm still learning. Old habits die hard, he acknowledged, but you're making progress. The morning of Michael's visit, I woke early and walked to the artisanal bakery 3 blocks from my building, selecting flaky croissants and rich chocolate scones, his favorites since childhood. I arranged fresh flowers on the dining table, tidied the already immaculate condo, and changed outfits twice before settling on a cashmere sweater in a soft teal that brought out the green in my eyes. When the doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m., I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door to my son. Michael stood there, looking both familiar and somehow changed. There were new lines around his eyes, a hesitancy in his posture that hadn't been there before. He held a small gift bag in one hand and a bouquet of lilies in the other. "Mom?" he said, voice cracking slightly. Then he stepped forward and embraced me, the flowers crushed between us. "I've missed you." I held him tightly, this grown man who would always be my little boy in some corner of my heart. "I've missed you too," I admitted. Over coffee and pastries, we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. He shared his struggles at the law firm, where his idealism was constantly challenged by the realities of corporate immigration. Work. I told him about my watercolor class, about the community I was building, about my plans for Italy. "You seem different," he observed, studying me across the table. "More vibrant somehow." "I feel different," I acknowledged. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm not defined by caregiving. Not for your father, not for you, not for my patients. I'm just Elaine." "And who is Elaine?" he asked softly. I considered the question, looking out at the river where sailboats glided past in the late morning sun. "I'm still figuring that out," I said finally. "But I'm enjoying the discovery process." Michael nodded, then reached for the gift bag he'd brought. "I found this while cleaning out some old boxes," he said, pushing it toward me. "I thought you might want it back." Inside was David's blue cardigan, the one I'd kept for years after his death, the one I'd sometimes wrap around myself during the hardest moments of single motherhood. I'd thought it lost in one of our moves. "I used to see you wearing this when you thought I was asleep," Michael said, his eyes glistening. "After finding out about Dad's heart condition, I'd pretend to be sleeping but watch through the cracked bedroom door. You'd sit at the kitchen table with bills spread out, wearing his sweater, sometimes crying silently. Then you'd wipe your eyes, straighten your shoulders, and get back to work." His voice broke. "I didn't understand then what you were sacrificing. I'm not sure I fully understood until you left." I ran my fingers over the worn blue fabric, memories washing over me. David's smile, the weight of responsibility after his death, the quiet determination that had carried me through decades of single parenthood. "Thank you for bringing this back to me," I said softly. "It belongs in my new home, a reminder of where I've been." "And where we go from here?" Michael asked, the question hanging between us like a delicate bridge waiting to be crossed. I met his gaze steadily. "Forward," I said. "Separately, but not estranged." "I'll always be your mother, Michael, but I'm also Elaine, a woman with her own dreams, her own needs, her own life to live." He nodded slowly. "I think I'm finally ready to know that version of you." As we stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, Later, watching boats on the river and pointing out landmarks visible from my spectacular view, I felt something settle inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. A recognition that relationships, like people, can transform without breaking. The burden I had carried wasn't just financial sacrifice or physical labor. It was the crushing weight of making myself small, of existing primarily in relation to others' needs. In lifting that burden from my own shoulders, I had found not just independence, but a version of myself I'd never known existed. A woman with paintbrushes instead of nursing scrubs, with Italian travel guides instead of college, tuition bills, with time that belonged solely to herself. Elaine's renaissance had begun. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of a centuries-old Tuscan farmhouse, flour dusting my hands as I learned to make pasta from scratch. Through the open windows, golden October sunlight spilled across rolling hills covered with vineyards. The other students, a retired couple from Canada, a young woman celebrating her divorce, and 3 friends on a girls' trip, laughed as our instructor, Sophia, gently corrected our technique. "Not so rough, Elaine," she chided in her melodious Italian accent. "You must treat the dough like a lover, with respect, yes, but also tenderness." I laughed, easing my grip on the rolling pin. After 4 days in Sophia's cooking school, I'd learned that food preparation in Italy wasn't just about sustenance, it was about connection, tradition, and finding joy in the process. A fitting metaphor for my new life. That evening, after a dinner of our handmade ravioli paired with local wine, I sat on the terrace of my rented villa and opened my tablet to find an email from Michael with a subject line that made my heart skip. Important news. "Mom, I wanted you to be among the first to know. I've left the law firm." After much soul-searching, and more than a few heated discussions with Amanda, I've accepted a position with the Immigrant Justice Project, a nonprofit that provides legal assistance to asylum seekers. The pay is significantly less, but the work aligns with why I became a lawyer in the first place. This wouldn't have been possible without your gift. The student loan payments would have kept me tethered to corporate law for at least another decade. You gave me more than financial freedom. You gave me the opportunity to find purpose again. In other news, Amanda is pregnant. We're due in May. She's finally agreed to meet with you when you return from Italy, though I should warn you she's still processing everything that happened. Your absence has forced both of us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our values. Your watercolors are beautiful, by the way. The one you sent of the Portland riverfront is framed in my new office, a daily reminder that it's never too late to discover hidden talents or change course. With love and gratitude, Michael, I set down the tablet, emotions washing over me like the warm Tuscan breeze. Michael was going to be a father. I was going to be a grandmother. And more surprisingly, he had found the courage to leave his prestigious job for work that fulfilled him, something I might never have expected from the status-conscious son who had been so quick to dismiss me. The next morning, I rose early and walked to the village buying a small, hand-painted ceramic rattle from a local artisan, my first gift for my future grandchild. As I strolled back to the villa, I reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. I had gone from feeling discarded and worthless to creating a life rich with new experiences and possibilities. 2 weeks later, I boarded a plane from Rome to Portland, my suitcase filled with Italian treasures, olive oils, wine, handmade leather journals, and a wardrobe that reflected my evolving style. The woman who had once lived in practical nurse's scrubs now appreciated the simple elegance of well-made linen shirts and cashmere sweaters. December arrived with unusual clarity in Portland, crisp, sunny days that showcased the snow-capped peak of Mount Hood against brilliant blue skies. My condo was transformed for the holidays with subtle decorations that complemented its modern aesthetic. A small, elegant tree with silver and blue ornaments, white lights draped along the balcony railing, Italian candles scenting the air with fig, and cypress. I had invited Michael for Christmas Eve dinner, with a tentative invitation extended to Amanda as well. I wasn't sure she would come until Michael texted from the airport. Landed. Both of us. Amanda's nervous, but trying, when my doorbell rang that evening. I took a calming breath before answering. Michael stood there in a dark wool coat, a bottle of wine in hand. Beside him, Amanda looked different than I remembered, softer somehow, her sharp edges muted by early pregnancy and, perhaps, by humility. "Merry Christmas," I said, opening the door wide. "Welcome to my home." The initial awkwardness dissipated as I gave them a tour of the condo. Amanda admired the view, commenting on the Christmas lights reflecting off the river. Michael examined my growing collection of watercolors, framed simply and arranged on one wall. "You've gotten really good," he said with genuine admiration. "These latest ones especially." "I've found I enjoy the process more than the result," I replied. "There's something meditative about mixing colors, watching how water and pigment interact." In the kitchen, Amanda hovered uncertainly until I asked for her help with the salad. As we worked side by side, she finally spoke directly to me. "Your condo is beautiful," she said, carefully slicing cucumber. "You've created a lovely life here." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "It's still evolving, but yes, I'm happy with where I've landed." She hesitated, then set down her knife. "I need to apologize, Elaine. What I said about you, calling you a burden, it was cruel and untrue. I was stressed about our finances, worried about starting a family with so much debt. But that's no excuse." I studied her face, searching for sincerity and finding what appeared to be genuine remorse. "We all say things we regret when we're feeling cornered," I said finally. "What matters is whether we learn from those moments." "I've learned more than I wanted to," she admitted with a rueful smile. "About gratitude, about family loyalty, about what actually matters. Michael almost left me when you moved out. Did he tell you that?" I shook my head, surprised. Michael had never mentioned such a serious rift. "He said I'd revealed a side of myself he couldn't reconcile with the woman he married," she continued, absently resting a hand on her slightly rounded belly. "It forced me to do some serious soul-searching. I'm still working on it, honestly." "Growth is rarely comfortable," I observed, returning to the vinaigrette I was whisking, "but usually worth the discomfort." Over dinner, salmon with dill sauce, roasted vegetables, and crusty bread from my favorite bakery, the conversation flowed more easily. We discussed Michael's new job, their preparations for the baby, my experiences in Italy. As we moved to the living room for dessert and coffee, Michael brought out a small wrapped package. "It's not much," he said, placing it in my hands. "But we wanted you to have something meaningful." Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a tree, its branches spreading outward from a sturdy trunk. "It's a family tree," Amanda explained, "with room to add birthstones." A small emerald, Michael's May birthstone, already hung from one branch. "We'll add the baby's stone when they arrive," Michael added, "and any others that might come along. We wanted you to know that despite everything, you are still the root of our family." I fastened the necklace around my neck, touched by the symbolism and the effort toward reconciliation it represented. "Thank you. It's perfect." Later, after they had left with promises to return for New Year's Day brunch, I stood at my window, watching the city lights sparkle against the night sky. The pendant rested against my skin, a tangible reminder of connections that bend but need not break. My phone chimed with a text from Diane. "How did it go with the daughter-in-law from hell?" I smiled, typing back. "Better than expected. She's changing. We all are." The next morning, Christmas Day, I joined a community dinner at the senior center near my condo. I'd begun volunteering there twice a week, teaching art to residents who, like me, were discovering new interests in their later years. The director had invited me to join their holiday celebration, and I'd brought along a panettone from Italy to share. As I helped serve slices of the sweet bread, a woman named Martha approached me. I'd been showing her basic watercolor techniques for several weeks, marveling at how quickly she'd progressed despite arthritic hands. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "For the art lessons, yes, but more for showing us that life can expand at our age, not just contract." Her words stayed with me as I walked home along the river path, snowflakes beginning to drift lazily from the sky, a rare white Christmas in Portland. Life expanding, not contracting. It was the perfect description of what I'd experienced since making the difficult choice to prioritize myself. 3 months later, on a rainy April afternoon, I received a call from Michael. "Amanda's in labor," he said, his voice a mixture of excitement and terror. "We're at Providence Hospital. She's asking for you." I arrived 20 minutes later, hurrying through the familiar hospital corridors that had once been my workplace. The maternity ward was unchanged, the same soothing pastel walls, the same hushed anticipation, the same mixture of joy and anxiety permeating the air. In Amanda's room, I found her between contractions, her face flushed with exertion but determined. When she saw me, she reached out her hand. "I'm glad you're here," she said simply. "I could use some of your strength right now." For the next 7 hours, I remained by her side along with Michael. I wiped her forehead with cool cloths, coached her breathing, advocated for her with nursing staff when needed. Drawing on decades of medical experience, I provided a steady, calming presence as she worked through the intensifying labor. "You've done this thousands of times," she gasped during a particularly difficult contraction. "Helped bring babies into the world." "Never as a grandmother," I replied, squeezing her hand. "This is a first for me, too." At 11:43 p.m., Julia Elaine Walker was born, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's dimpled chin. When they placed her in my arms, I felt the full circle of life's journey, from the young mother who had held newborn Michael while David looked on proudly, to the grandmother cradling his daughter, having discovered that life could indeed expand. In unexpected ways. "We named her after your sister," Michael explained, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. "And you, of course, the 2 strongest women we know." 2 weeks later, I held a small gathering at my condo. Diane, my watercolor instructor, new friends from the walking group and senior center, and of course, Michael, Amanda, and baby Julia. As we shared food and stories, I realized I had created something I'd never consciously sought, a chosen family, a community built not from obligation but from genuine connection. After everyone had gone, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the river in shades of gold and pink. In my lap was a letter I'd written to Julia, my sister, not my granddaughter, updating her on all that had transpired since her death. It was a ritual I'd begun during my time in Italy, a way of processing my journey and honoring her final gift to me. "Dear Julia, your great niece has your curious eyes and determined spirit. I see you in her already. I wish you could hold her, could see how your generosity has rippled outward, creating possibilities none of us could have imagined. You told me to be selfish with your gift, but I've discovered something unexpected, that true selfishness sometimes circles back to generosity, and that boundaries can strengthen connections rather than sever them. By refusing to remain a burden or to be defined as one, I found my own worth beyond caregiving. And in doing so, I taught my son the value of looking beyond immediate self-interest to deeper purpose. The money you left me has changed all our lives, but not in the ways anyone might have predicted. It became not just financial capital, but moral capital, a force for truth and transformation. I'll always miss you, but I carry your wisdom with me. And now, a piece of you lives on in little Julia, who will grow up knowing the story of her great-aunt's extraordinary gift and the ripples of change it created. With eternal gratitude, Elaine, I folded the letter and tucked it away with the others. The weight of the silver family tree pendant against my chest reminded me that roots remain, even as branches reach toward new skies. The woman who had once been called a burden had become instead a foundation, strong enough to support others, because she had finally learned to support herself first. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.